Shingo was a lonely, poor office worker, but one day he found himself reincarnated as a noble in a world of swords and magic. But the only problem left is that he has so many older brothers that he's basically treated like an ugly peasant. How will Shingo be able to survive and become the strongest magician in the world? The episode starts with Shingo, a poor office worker, returning to his empty apartment. One night, as he prepares for a late dinner, he accidentally dozes off in front of his meal. When he finally wakes up, he suddenly found himself in front of a different meal. He notices a strange face reflected on the plate before him. He realizes he has become a child in an unfamiliar world, and it appears to be a wedding celebration. Initially, he thinks he might be dreaming, but everything feels so real that he can hardly believe it. He closes his eyes, hoping to wake from this strange dream, but a voice tells him to wake up. An elderly man stands in front of him and told him to introduce himself. Shingo realizes all the adults are staring at him. Thankfully, another older boy, named Eric, introduces him as his youngest brother, Wendelin von Baumeister, or Well for short. Afterward, Eric sits down beside Well and asks him if his mind went blank earlier. So Eric explains everything to him. Today is their eldest brother Kurt's wedding. He married the second daughter of a poor noble, Amelie. Everyone was enjoying the party, but Well was still getting used to his new body and unfamiliar circumstances. He's grateful that he automatically understands the language and can read the signs around him. Observing the lavish ceremony for his brother, he suspects the family must be quite wealthy. Being the third son, he realizes he won't have to worry about working or starving. With that thought in mind, he picks up his fork and returns to enjoying the feast. The next morning, Well looks at his breakfast, hard bread and watery soup. While his family eats happily, he notices the old, worn room and the rickety table. When his brother Eric comes home from fishing, Well asks why they seem so poor after last night's fancy party. Eric then explains that they can't look cheap when they have guests, so they pretend to be a rich noble. The cracked walls were covered with curtains for the celebration, and the special food was just for that night. But now, they are back to their old lifestyle. Well doesn't understand this. He still thinks that he is the third son of a noble family. He should still get something. To his surprise, his brother Eric greets Helmut, another brother who just came back from hunting. Two more young men, Paul and Herman, join them. Eric then mentions that two other brothers couldn't make it to the wedding. Well finally realizes they're not just poor nobles. He's the eighth son of a poor noble family. It looks like his parents had too much fun in the bedroom. Well tries to study about his territory. He sees they're in the kingdom of Helmut, home to 1 million people. To the south lies the dukedom of Bleichroder, and even further south is the Baumeister Knight-Dom, a rural area with only 800 residents. As the eighth son there, he can't help but feel depressed about his new life. But he then sees his three brothers saying farewell to their mother and he rushes over to ask what's happening. Eric explains that they're actually leaving. They can't divide their lands, so brother Kurt will inherit everything, while brother Herman will stay to help him. The others will need to find jobs and start their own lives in the capital. Eric pats on his head, advising him to learn some skills and stop goofing off. Well sadly waves goodbye to them as his brothers depart. He heads to the family library to prepare for his future but finds only poetry books. While putting them back, he accidentally knocks a box off the shelf. Inside the box are a piece of paper and a crystal ball. The paper explains that the crystal ball can measure a person's magic potential. Well was about to toss the paper, thinking magic couldn't be real, but he remembered he was in a different world. He kept reading and learned that out of thousands of people, only one has enough mana to cast spells. The paper explained that magic isn't hereditary, anyone can have the potential to be a great magician. And the crystal ball could help him discover if he had what it takes. Well didn't think he'd be lucky enough to have magic potential, but he decided to give it a try. He placed the crystal ball on the desk and focused on pouring his mana into it. At first, nothing happened, but then the ball suddenly lit up with a bright white glow. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a long-haired man sensed a disturbance and turned to look around. Back in the castle, Well is still shocked that the crystal ball actually reacted to him. He picks up the paper and tries to find out what it means. According to the text, the ball will shine like a rainbow if he has a high aptitude for magic. Thus, they advise the user to recommend learning magic through specialized guides. Well starts tearing through the library looking for these guidebooks. However, all he can find are novels, travel guides, and random poetry books. There are no magic books anywhere. His father then arrived at the library looking for him. When Well asked if they had any other books, his father admitted he couldn't read, and asked Well to go to the forest to gather firewood. Later, in the forest, Well picked up a random stick and attempted to cast magic, but no matter what he did, he couldn't activate his magic. Feeling defeated, Well slumped to the ground. Suddenly, a voice spoke to him. A long-haired man floated down from the sky, expressing relief at finding someone with the same magic potential. He came in front of Well and asked for his name, but Well trembled in fear and brandished his stick to scare him off. The man calmly apologized for startling him and explains to Well that he is a magician. Suddenly, they heard a noise. The man and Well looked down the cliff and saw a huge wild boar pushing a boulder. When the boar saw them, it charged up the hill, thinking they were a threat. The man grabbed Well and pointed his hands at the boar and urged him to imagine wind magic. They both start glowing with green light. Well is panicking as the boar charges at them, but finally, his magic kicks in, and a strong wind blasts from his hand, pushing the boar back. The boar is still alive. However, this time, the man uses his own magic to throw it aside. The man then finally introduces himself as a former court magician, Alfred Rainford. After the boar incident, Alfred and Well sit down for tea. Alfred says he wants to pass on his magic to Well. Well asks why, since he can't even pay for it. But Alfred just wants a disciple. Before they begin training, Alfred warns Well to keep his magic a secret. He explains that if others find out, it could lead to family conflicts. The next day, their first training session starts. Alfred tries to measure Well's mana and is surprised to discover that Well's mana exceeds his own capacity. Well starts practicing his fire magic, and Alfred praises him for learning quickly. Alfred then gives Well a basket full of vegetables to keep up the illusion that he's just doing chores at the mountain. That night, the family praises him for gathering so many vegetables, but Kurt looks annoyed and begins to wonder if Well can use magic. A few days later, Well and Alfred are flying through the sky. Well practices tracking magic and successfully hunts 2 birds. While they eat, Alfred warns Well not to go too deep into the woods, as many dangerous monsters are still lurking there. After the meal, Well tells Alfred that he feels like Kurt has been secretly watching him. Alfred thinks Kurt might have realized Well's magical potential and is worried about his status as heir. Well admits he doesn't want to be lord, it sounds like a hassle, and he doesn't want to cause problems for Kurt. Still, he has no plans for the future. Alfred suggests trying out adventuring, which intrigues Well. He closes his eyes and wonders about his future. Meanwhile, a violet aura suddenly appears around Alfred's arm. Alfred quickly hides his hand from Well. At dinner, Well tells his family about his plans to become an adventurer. His older brother is happy, but their father points out that they don't have enough money for Well to enroll in the Adventurers Academy. During their next training session, Alfred takes Well to the town of Breitberg, where the academy is located. In Breitberg, anyone can join merchant guilds. Well realizes he can earn money by selling items through a guild, but first, he needs to learn how to travel. So, Alfred starts teaching him flight magic. Later that night, Alfred fights his dark curse again. The next day, while Well practices flying magic, Alfred tells him it will be their last training session. Well asks him to stay, saying they've only trained for 2 weeks, but Alfred refuses. During dinner, their father reveals that an undead creature resembling a human has been spotted in the forest. Although it appears human, it is actually a corpse, and after a few years, it will lose its consciousness and transform into a zombie. Suddenly, Wells remembers that Alfred is still out there in the woods. Well, worried about his master, flies through the dark forest in search of him. When he finally finds Alfred, he warns him about the undead lurking nearby and tries to pull him away. To Wells' shock, Alfred reveals that he himself is the undead, 5 years ago while accompanying the Duke on a quest for a rare medicine. They were attacked by monsters, and although Alfred fought bravely, he ultimately met his end when his mana was depleted. Alfred became undead because he had a wish he still wanted to fulfill, to pass on his magical knowledge. When he sensed Well's presence, he was overjoyed. This was his chance to finally move on. All Well needed to do was complete his final trial, to purge him with holy magic. Although Well hesitated, Alfred revealed the spreading curse within him, warning that he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer before becoming a zombie. Desperate for salvation, Alfred urged Well to purify his soul. He began teaching Well how to use holy magic. As Well cast the spell, the black aura surrounding Alfred began to disappear, and he cried out in pain. Nevertheless, Alfred encourages Well to keep going. Tears flow from Well's eyes as he faces the painful goodbye to his master. Alfred asks him to remember his teachings. As he fades into the light, he smiles and tells Well to enjoy his life. Well cries out into the night, but he wipes his tears and smiles, promising to follow his teacher's last words. A few years later, Well waves goodbye to his mother as he sets off to pursue his dream of becoming an adventurer. At the Adventurer Academy, he stands out as the only student able to use advanced magic, even surpassing his instructors. This makes his classmates wary of him, and they start to avoid him, fearing they might annoy him. During dinner, Well feels lonely, realizing no one has invited him to join their party. The truth is that everyone wants Well to join their party, but they're too afraid to approach him. In their next class, the teachers assign them to go hunting. Excited to finally team up with others, Well quickly notices that everyone has formed their own groups. Reluctantly, he sets out to hunt alone. A few hours later, the students present their catches to the instructor. Erwin's group boasts confidently about their 3 boars. When it's Well's turn, he pulls out a magic bag given to him by Alfred and starts pulling out various animals, soon filling the entire table. That night, Erwin shares his troubles with the girls. As younger siblings, they all feel neglected and disposable, often shunned by their families. Frustrated that their dreams are being crushed because they born late, they vow not to give up and strong. The next day, they venture deep into the forest, but soon find themselves surrounded by wolves. Thankfully, Well is nearby and senses their danger with his tracking magic. He quickly rushes to the scene. Erwin, Louise, and Yenna are fighting off the wolves, but there are too many of them. Erwin gets hurt and more wolves jump at them. Just then, Well arrives and saves them. Later, they apologize to Well for the trouble and say they just wanted him to join their party, which he happily accepts. Suddenly, their instructor bursts in, saying they're all invited to a party hosted by the Duke. The classroom fills with excitement at the news. However, one classmate remarks that they were probably invited because the Duke wants to speak with their great mage classmate. At the party, this guess turns out to be true. Duke Bleichroder ignores everyone else and goes straight to Well, inviting him and his party for a private discussion. Inside the mansion, Duke Amadeus introduces Well to Brantag, the current court magician and Alfred's former teacher. Brantag reveals he felt Alfred's presence vanish 7 years ago and thought Alfred finally found a disciple. Since Well comes from the same area where Alfred died and carries his magic bag, Brantag asks if he is Alfred's disciple. Well confirms this and shares his master's final moments. Brantag is sad to hear that, but is grateful to Well for giving Alfred the peace he needed. Well returns the magic bag, which holds supplies from the Duke's army that went into the forest before. The Duke confirms the items, and tells Well he will receive a finder's fee of 1,000 gold coins for returning Alfred's belongings. He is also surprised to learn that he will inherit Alfred's estate. Later that night, Well is having meal in his new mansion, feeling lonely in the large space and wishing his friends could live with him. The next day, Well and his friends are on a magic airship heading to the capital for his brother's wedding. Brantag, who is acting as their guide to the capital, is chatting when dark clouds suddenly appear. In the clouds, a huge skeletal dragon shows up. The passengers quickly complain to the crew about the dragon. The crew reassures them that 2 skilled magicians on board will handle the dragon. Meanwhile, in the ship, Brantag already feels defeated, because he can't use holy magic which is needed to defeat the undead dragon. However, he knows someone who can help. He turns to Well and pressures him to do it. Well uses flight magic to get close to the skeletal dragon, which breathes dark flames at him. He uses a barrier to protect himself. Brandtag creates a barrier around the airship to protect the passengers. Well casts holy magic and attacks the dragon. The dragon tries to fight back, but Well's magic breaks through and hits it. A few seconds later, the dragon disintegrates, and its bones starts to fall. Well uses his magic bag to collect the bones and the dragon's core. The passengers celebrate with a party on the ship, where Brandtag introduces Eritirio, his former party member who is now a merchant. The next morning, they arrive in the capital city of Starburg. After they disembark, Brandtag leaves them with Eritirio just as a group of knights arrives. They thank Well for slaying the dragon and invite him to the palace. There, the king rewards Well with the noble title of baronet. As the ministers argued about how much to pay Well for the dragon's bones and gem, Cardinal Hohenheim steps in to help, urging them to agree on a fair price. At Eric's wedding, Well notices his older brothers looking upset. They explains that they hadn't received their family's wedding gift, and their eldest brother, Kurt, had written them a letter saying that they don't have money. Feeling bad for them, Well offered to pay for the gift. The wedding ceremony went well, and Well clapped happily, but inside, he thought being a noble was too much hassle. The next episode begins with Well being baptized by Cardinal Hohenheim. Well offers a generous gift for inviting him to their religion. Suddenly, a girl in a nun's uniform enters with tea and introduces herself as Elise, the cardinal's granddaughter. When Well stands to introduce himself, he realizes she can use holy healing magic, which impresses him since even he can't use it. Elise is known for healing the wounded at the church and is called Saint Hohenheim. However, the cardinal hopes she will have a normal life and marry, as many families are seeking her hand. Well jokingly says he might join the competition. The cardinal agrees and asks him if it would be proper for them to get married once he comes of age. Well soon realizes that he was tricked by the cardinal. Well is engaged just minutes after meeting Elise. Later, Cardinal Hohenheim enjoys tea in his garden and tells his butler that Well is a smart young man with a bright future, and having Elise marry him will benefit their family. Meanwhile, at his brother's house, Well shares the news of his engagement to his friends, who are all happy for him. However, Well feels unsatisfied. He wishes he could get to know Elise better before getting engaged.
That's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it and want to see the next part, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.